Tonight on Bridge City News, a terrorist attack in London has left 3 people with stab wounds while the attacker was shot dead by police. More countries join the ban on travelers from China as the first death from the coronavirus outside of China is reported in the Philippines. And it is Groundhog Day. We'll show you what the prognostications turned out to be if you believe in the prophetic power of these furry little creatures.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Paul Arthur.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. London's Metropolitan Police report at least 3 people were injured in a stabbing incident that they are treating as terror-related. One of the victims is in life-threatening condition. Police shot and killed the attacker. A 19-year-old student who lives in the South London neighborhood says he saw a man with a machete and silver canisters on his chest being chased by what he assumed was an undercover police officer. Streatham is a busy residential area. Unlike areas hit by earlier attacks, it is not where any major landmarks are located. Police are now searching the shooter's residence and tracing his internet records. New Zealand is joining the U.S., Japan, Singapore, Australia, and the Philippines in banning travelers from China. Earlier today, the Philippines reported the first death from the new coronavirus outside of China. A 44-year-old Chinese man from Wuhan who had developed severe pneumonia after being admitted to hospital late last month. As of today, the number of infections is approaching the 15,000 mark globally, with 304 deaths. The travel restrictions have drawn criticism from China, saying they are unnecessarily hurting trade and travel. Canada has 4 confirmed cases, but health officials say the latest Ontario case is a mild one. There are growing complaints of anti-Chinese sentiment around the world in the wake of the outbreak. Restaurants in South Korea, Japan, Hong Kong, and Vietnam have refused to accept Chinese customers. There have been protests in Indonesia demanding the removal of Chinese hotel guests, and newspapers in France and Australia have been criticized for racist headlines. Chinese and other Asians in Europe and New Zealand are also complaining of racial discrimination. Lethbridge police seized drugs and stolen property in a north side bust late Friday afternoon. Officers were executing a search warrant for stolen bikes in the 300 block of 20th Street North. That's when they noticed evidence of drug use and drug trafficking. 7 people in the home were arrested and are facing numerous charges. Approximately $9,000 in stolen property was recovered. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney has announced money for 76 new addiction treatment beds at 3 treatment facilities. Kenney told an audience at Fresh Start Recovery Centre in Calgary yesterday that addressing addictions is a priority, even as the province trims spending during tough times.
And yet, even in that environment where we're trimming spending by a couple, 2 or 3% overall, there's one area where we're spending a lot more. And that's this. That's in programs like this, in addiction, treatment and recovery, as well as mental health services to Albertans. Today, I've got a very happy duty to say, as part of the Government of Alberta's serious effort to get behind the unsung heroes fighting addiction, to support programs like Fresh Start, Sunrise, and Thorpe, I am pleased to announce here today that we are funding 76 new beds, creating over 2,100 patient spaces in 3 more addiction facilities.
Fresh Start Executive Director Stacey Peterson says the support for abstinence-based treatment and long-term recovery is unprecedented. The funding announcements follow another the province made in December to fund 28 beds at the Poundmakers Lodge treatment centres near Edmonton. A landslide in BC's Hemlock Valley has washed away a road to the Sasquatch Mountain Ski Resort, leaving hundreds of people stranded. BC's Ministry of Transportation says it could be up to 6 days before a single lane can be opened for alternating traffic. The resort estimates as many as 500 people, including about 100 staff members, are in the village. A helicopter company is offering a shuttle service off the mountain to the nearby Chilliwack Airport for a fee of $150 per person. It's Groundhog Day. Good news from Ontario's Wyerton Willie and Quebec's Fred Lamarmont. They are predicting an early spring, but Nova Scotia's Shubenacadie Sam is predicting 6 more weeks of winter. His handlers report Sam saw his shadow when he emerged from his burrow northeast of Halifax this morning. Statistics show the rodents don't have a great track record when it comes to long-term forecasting. The usual festivities for Shubenacadie Sam were canceled this morning because of a snowstorm that moved through the area overnight. However, south of the border, our American friends do Groundhog Day in a big way. Thousands come out every year to Gobbler's Knob, Pennsylvania, for a major celebration with the star Punxsutawney Phil.
Welcome to Gobbler's Knob, home of Punxsutawney Phil. Phil, 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 Phil. Punxsutawney Phil. Bill, we got two scrolls here. One is winter, one is summer. What do you think, buddy? Huh? Spring. I don't know. What do you think, buddy? Huh? The closest one to you? Let's do that one. For there is no shadow of me. Spring will be early. It's a certainty.
Republicans in South Dakota have passed a bill by a 46-23 margin, which makes it a misdemeanor for doctors to provide puberty blockers or other treatments to conduct gender reassignment procedures on children under 16 years old. The bill will be sent to the state Senate for a committee hearing as soon as next week. LGBTQ advocates argue the bill is discriminatory, but Republicans cite studies showing the treatments often leave vulnerable children sterilized and/or surgically mutilated. 7 other U.S. states are considering passing similar legislation. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says the United States can provide Belarus with 100% of its oil and gas. It's a slap at Russia, which recently cut off supplies to the country. Pompeo is in Belarus seeking to improve ties with the former Soviet republic as its relations with Russia become further strained. Belarus fears Russia is trying to absorb it and is using energy as leverage.
The United States wants to help Belarus build its own sovereign country. Our energy producers stand ready to deliver 100% of the oil you need at competitive prices. We're the biggest energy producer in the world, and all you have to do is call us. In that spirit, I talked to President Lukashenko about tackling some of the obstacles that present American businesses for more readily and easily accessing this market, and emphasized the need for a level playing field. In closing, I want to emphasize that we fully support Belarus' desire to make its own choices.
Officials in Australia say the wildfire threat has diminished across New South Wales state and around the national capital, Canberra, although there are reports of several homes being destroyed in the rural southeast. A state of emergency for Canberra and surrounding areas will remain in place until at least Monday, and residents close to the blaze are being warned to remain vigilant. Since September, the bushfires across southern Australia have claimed at least 33 lives, destroyed more than 3,000 homes, and torched more than 10.6 million hectares. Hundreds of Lebanese and Palestinian protesters demonstrated today near the U.S. Embassy in Beirut against a White House plan for ending the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Protesters waving Palestinian flags shouted, "Death to America, death to Israel, we will die and Palestine will survive." The U.S. plan grants the Palestinians limited self-rule in parts of the occupied West Bank, while allowing Israel to annex all its settlements there and keep most of East Jerusalem, which Palestinians claim as the capital of a future Palestinian state. Lebanon is home to tens of thousands of Palestinian refugees. A couple of Irish seniors took a trip to Pakistan last summer after hearing about children being forced into slave labor, working long hours to make bricks. They discovered dismal conditions and children in need of clean water. Peter Wooding reports.
After a life-changing trip to the country where they saw firsthand the exploitation of those known as the brickyard children, Maurice and Maureen Wiley have launched a charity called Rescue Their Cry to help set these young people free from this life of slavery. Maureen says one of the first things they were able to provide was clean drinking water for these enslaved children.
Working in the heat of the day, some unclothed, permanent marks on their shoulders from carrying the bricks, and yet here they were, waiting on water, being pumped out for the first time. But I've never seen children so desperate to get a drink before, to keep them healthy, to keep them alive really. And I think that was the part that touched the most was seeing that these are lives that we can help.
Wiley concluded by explaining how they're seeking to provide long-lasting freedom to these young lives through a rescue centre called the Ark.
So our objective at this moment is keep them alive as best we know how to do, with the future prospects of bringing them out. Teaching them, we have teachers at hand ready to teach them. We've been promised that they can get jobs in a secure city. And once they have built up a revenue of income for themselves and know how to manage life again, really, then they can go forward. And that's why it's going to be called the Ark. We're going to call this the Ark because this is them coming out 2 by 2. And we do believe that that's what God has given us, and they can then go forward and walk in the fullness of who they're meant to be in this life.
Peter Wooding for the Global News Alliance.
If you would like to support this mission, you can log on to rescuetheircry.com. Recapping one of our top news stories, a residential community in London has been left shaken after a terrorist attack in London this morning left 3 people with stab wounds while the attacker was shot dead by police. And a look at weekend weather, a few clouds overnight with a low of -11. For tomorrow, increasing cloudiness with a 60% chance of flurries and a high of only -8. Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Newdorf joined us recently to discuss a number of current issues, including the ongoing challenges of the opioid crisis. Al Roberts has that interview coming right up. But first, here's a look at what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News Community Calendar. Night to Shine is an event sponsored by the Tim Tebow Foundation and hosted by My Victory Lethbridge on Friday, February 7th. Night to Shine is an unforgettable prom night experience for people with special needs, ages 14 and older. This complimentary event begins on a red carpet with guests receiving the royal treatment. For details and to register, visit myvictory.ca. And if you'd like to volunteer, email carol@myvictory.ca. Celebrate Family Day at the Galt Museum and Archives for their second annual free pancake brunch. Taking place on February 17th beginning at 10 a.m., come and enjoy delicious pancakes, music, crafts, and games. Admission is free. For more information, visit galtmuseum.com/events. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.